Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Wahyu Ramadhan, and this video is explaining about history of English literature for middle test. So the first is the Old English or English section. Is the beginning of the histories of literature in Britain. Since the Romans occupied Britain, the literature is a part of tradition and it was infrequently written down. The literature such as poets used for praising God, battle songs, heroes, and their ships. The first landed of the Angles and Saxons in Britain in the middle of the 5th century. They conquered Britain to make it their home unlike the Romans. They became the ancestor of the English race, and the Old Anglo-Saxon old language which formed basis modern language. Before the Angles and Saxons came to Britain, they lived along the coast of Sweden and Denmark. They conquered the land and gave it a name, and it was called England. They stood from the 5th century to the 11th century. Then in 1066, Norman conquered the Britain and led by William of Normandy. Most of the Anglo-Saxon poetry is lost and there are some anonymous fragments left. So, Beowulf is the poem of this period that tells greatness of a hero. Beowulf was written in the 8th century by unknown writers. It was the best known long text of the Old English, the epic poem in alliterative verse. Beowulf tells about a legendary hero who kills powerful frightening creature and become a king. He defeated the mortal enemy of the area, the monster Grendel, and had thus made the territory safe for its people. The people and the setting are both Germany. The poems recall a shared heroic past, somewhere in general consciousness of the audience who would hear it. The language of Beowulf is extremely rich and inventive, full of imposing tones and rhythms. There are a great many near synonyms for warrior, many compounding adjectives denoting hardness, many images of light, color, and blood, many superlatives and exaggeration to underline heroic and legendary aspect of the tale. So, William the Conqueror. This is about medieval era. The next is medieval era. Norman conquerors of 1066. The Normans were Vikings who had settled along the coast of France. The local people called them the Norsemen from Norway. They eventually become known as the Normans, and the land they live in become known as Normandy. Through a truce with the King of France, Normandy became a duchy of France, and their leader was called the Duke of Normandy. The characteristics of this era is they had the kings and the rulers, the government, Christian morality, for the language, their religion, and the writers and the works of this era is what is in the world we now call the Middle English period, late 12th century to the 1485. Didn't necessarily always write in English. The language was in a state of flux. Attempts were made the effort to French language, to keep down the local language, English, and to make the language of the church the language of the writing. And the major growth of the literature came more than a century after Layman's birth, and confirms the range of potential language for literature. Robert Manning based his lively handling sign, a first treatise on the Ten Commandments and the Seven Deadly Sins of the French source. So, the words said Renaissance. The third, we're gonna talk about Renaissance. Implies the rebirth of the culture, and learning Renaissance was initially started in Italy in the late 14th century. The European scholar and writer found that the Renaissance was doing good at Italy. So, at around 1500, they broke in the Renaissance literature in England. This age is one of the most important in the history of English literature. So there are several factors for the coming Renaissance literature in England. The first primary factor is the introduction of the printing press. It made it possible for the writers to produce writers' work. And secondly, the flock in England has passed and the 100 years. Wars were over. About the characteristic in this era is about the social condition. In this period, England's population doubled, prices rocketed, rents followed, and all social loyalties dissolved. And now, industrial, agricultural, and commercial fans were first staved. Real wages hit an all-time low in the 1012, and the social relations were plunged into a state of the fluidity from which the merchant and ambitious leisure gentleman profited at the expense of the aristocrat and the laborer, as a satire and comedies current from the 15th, 15th and 19th. Complained, meanwhile, the huge body of poor fell, even further behind the rich. The pamphlet of Thomas Herman in this 1566 and the Robert Journey on the 1591 until 92, as well as Shakespeare and the choleric King Lear. This is a 1605 until '06. And the next is provides glimpse of a horrific world of vagabondage and crime, the Elizabethans' biggest unsolvable social problem. So the first Restoration and Revolution era. The period from the 16th until 70th is named as the Restoration period. In 1660, King Charles II was brought to the throne to the people of England were suffering from tension due to the strict rule of Cromwell. Thus the nation welcomed the restoration of Charles. This restoration brought about a revolutionary change in social life and literature. The following characteristics distinguish this period. But the first is the restoration is ugly. The religious and political quarrels, the revolution, the rise of neoclassicism, imitation of the ancients. So the writers is Thomas Hobbes, 1588 until 1679. He was a naturalist who studied that the natural science should be the foundation of all human knowledge. His ideas are expressed in the book The Leviathan. The second is John Locke, 1632 until 1705. And he said that all human beings and the governments are formed to protect this right. His theories about politics are written in the book Theories on Government. And the last, in 18th century in English literature has been called the Augustan Age, the neoclassical age and the age of reason. It was termed by the Augustan Age because the literary writers during the time were consciously imitating the works of the original Augustan writers, Horace and Virgil, who had lived during the time Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and generally regarded as a golden age, like the period of Roman history, which had achieved politically stability and the power as well as flourishing of the arts. The characteristic of the 18th century is about the classical age. So this period in the first place is called the classical age because the reason dominated for emotion, social convention become more important than individual conviction. for became more important than content. The term classic is applied to the designed writing of the finest quality. According to Goethe, everything that is good in the literature is classical. Every national literature had at least one period in which an unusual number of exceptional writers produced books of understanding quality. And this called the classical period of nation literature. So the writers in this period there is a Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope was the predominant figure in the theology on the 18th centuries. He was the representative poet of his century. He was the only poet who presented in his work almost the essential qualities of theological school of poetry. So his major works are there's there are an essay on criticism, the temple of fame, a vision, and there was Eloisa to Abelard. So the second writer there is Jonathan Swift, was an Irish author and satirist, best known for writing Gulliver's Travels. He was dean of the St. Patrick Cathedral in Dublin. He was Irish author, clergyman, and satirist Jonathan Swift grew up fatherless. So his works are there are Gulliver's Travels, a tale of a thumb, a tale of a tub. So the last is Modest Proposal. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.